She was sleeping in my house, right there on my old worn-out sofa, her head resting on a rolled-up sweatshirt, one arm draped over her waist, like she was guarding secrets even in her sleep. The blanket didn't fully cover her. It never really does with those hand-me-downs. One leg was bare to the knee, and her leather jacket had slipped halfway off her shoulder, revealing a smooth collarbone and a glimpse of skin I tried not to stare at, but failed. I stood in the kitchen doorway, coffee in hand, pretending to sip, but really just watching. Not in a creepy way, just in that stunned, unsure, what the hell is going on way. Because a woman like her, she didn't belong in a place like mine. She looked like she'd stepped out of another world, hair still a little damp from the rain, lips slightly parted in sleep, long lashes casting shadows under her eyes. Her curves caught the low light just enough to make my chest tighten with something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. God, she was beautiful. Not just in the magazine cover sense, but in the kind of way that made you suddenly feel aware of your own heartbeat. And me? I'm just a mechanic with oil-stained hands and a 7-year-old asleep down the hall. I hadn't had a woman in my home since Sarah passed. And now here I was, watching a stranger breathe softly in the quiet of my living room, and wondering if life had just pulled the first thread of a story I wasn't ready for, but ready or not. If you've ever been blindsided by something or someone you couldn't explain, stick with me. Hit like, subscribe to the channel, Daily Stories of Grace. Let me tell you how this one night changed everything. Because it started right here, with a storm, and her, sleeping on my damn couch. It was the kind of rain that swallowed sound, fat, relentless drops hammering the tin roof of my garage, turning the gravel outside into a slushy mess of puddles and mud. I was finishing up work on an old Ford, hands still slick with grease, when I heard it. 3 knocks. Soft, hesitant, almost like whoever was knocking wasn't sure they belonged there. I wiped my hands on a rag and slid open the garage door. The cold air hit me first, then her. She stood in the downpour like she'd walked out of some movie, soaked to the bone, her helmet tucked under one arm, her hair plastered to her face in wet ribbons. Her leather jacket clung to her curves, and water dripped steadily from the hem of her jeans into her pristine white sneakers, now splattered with Oregon dirt. But what struck me most wasn't how beautiful she was. It was how she didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She didn't smile politely like she was trying to be small. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "My bike broke down a few miles back. I saw your lights. I didn't know where else to go." Her voice was clear, calm, and just a little hoarse, like she'd been riding through the storm for hours. I didn't ask questions, didn't overthink it. I just stepped aside and said, "Come in," because something in her face said this wasn't just about the rain. And I guess part of me already knew. The inside of my place isn't much. Just a converted garage with a little kitchen shoved against one wall and a sofa that's seen better decades. But it's dry, it's warm, and that night it was enough. I tossed her a towel and pointed toward the heater. She nodded, started peeling off her soaked jacket, and hung it by the door. Underneath, she wore a dark gray t-shirt, clinging just enough to show she was in shape. More than in shape, honestly. I looked away before I got caught staring. Sophie peeked out from the hallway, rubbing her eyes and holding her favorite stuffed bear. "Daddy? Who's that?" "This is a friend," I said. "She got caught in the storm. Why don't you say hi?" Sophie, always curious, stepped forward and studied Amber like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "You're really pretty," she said bluntly. "You smell like wet leather." Amber laughed, a small, surprise sound that almost felt like it startled her too. "Well, I guess I do," she replied gently. Dinner was cup noodles and leftover banana bread. I offered it with a shrug. Gourmets closed on rainy nights. She didn't complain. She said thank you, sat at the tiny table and ate with quiet grace like she was used to much fancier things, but didn't mind pretending otherwise. I asked what she did for work. She hesitated, just a flicker, but I noticed. "Administration stuff," she said. "Mostly emails and meetings. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either, and for some reason, I didn't push. The storm hadn't let up. Sometime around 2 a.m., I woke to the sharp patter of rain against the metal siding and the groan of the wind outside. Old habit. I got up to check the back door, make sure nothing was leaking, nothing flying loose out in the yard. I walked barefoot past the living room, toward the rear of the garage. The floor was cold. The air smelled like wet concrete and motor oil. And then I heard her, a soft murmur at first, barely audible over the wind. I paused. Amber shifted in her sleep, her brow drawn tight. Her lips moved again, the words trembling out between shallow breaths. Don't make me marry him. A beat. I'm not your puppet. Her voice cracked like something inside her was splintering in the dark. Then, silence. I stood frozen, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it, like it wasn't a dream, but a memory resurfacing without her permission. She looked so different in that moment, vulnerable, small, nothing like the self-contained woman who'd knocked on my door hours earlier. That version of her had control, precision, steel in her spine. But this was something else. This was someone cracking under pressure too long ignored. I watched for a second longer, then gently pulled the blanket back over her shoulder. I didn't know who she was, but I knew pain when I heard it, and I'd heard that kind of pain before. In my own sleep, whispering Sarah's name, night after night. As I stood there in the dark, I realized something that made me uneasy. Whatever road brought her to my door tonight, she wasn't just running from the rain, she was running from something far worse, and maybe she hadn't stopped running at all. I thought that night was a one-time thing. Storms pass, strangers move on. That's just the way it works around here. Willow Creek isn't exactly the kind of place people stay in unless they were born here, or trying to disappear. So when I saw the Harley roll up the next afternoon, just as the sun was burning off the last of the gray clouds, I froze mid-turn under the hood of Mrs. Hendrick's Camry. I recognized the sound of that engine before I even saw her. Same low purr, same slightly off rhythm I'd meant to check once the storm stopped. I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped outside, just as she cut the ignition and pulled off her helmet. Her hair was dry this time, pulled back into a loose ponytail, and her cheeks were a little pink from the afternoon sun. She gave me a small, cautious smile, one of those half smiles people use when they're not sure if they're welcome. "Still having issues," she said, patting the side of the Harley. "It sputtered the whole way here. Figured I'd stop by in case you had time." I hesitated, not because I didn't want to see her. I won't lie, a small part of me did, but because something about this felt complicated. Still, I gestured her in. "Sure. Let's take a look." She dismounted gracefully and parked the bike by the side of the garage. No small talk, no mention of last night. She just sat down on the same overturned milk crate from before and folded her hands in her lap like she'd done it 100 times. That's when Sophie came tearing around the corner, covered in sidewalk chalk and barefoot as usual. The moment she spotted Amber, her whole face lit up like a porch light in July. "You came back!" she squealed. Amber's eyes softened. She knelt down, arms open, and Sophie ran straight into her like they'd done this a dozen times before. Not even a second of hesitation, not a single question. That got to me. I stood there, holding a wrench, feeling something twist in my chest. There was a comfort between them that didn't make any logical sense, and yet, somehow, it felt more real than half the things I'd seen between adults who had known each other for years. I told myself she'd be gone soon. Maybe she just needed another tune-up. Maybe she was passing through and the storm had delayed her. But she came back again the day after that, and the one after that. Some days she brought Sophie chalk or a book. Other days, she just sat nearby while I worked, sipping coffee from a thermos that somehow always smelled better than mine. I didn't ask why. I just let it happen. And before I even realized it, hearing that engine pull up became the part of my day I didn't know I needed, until she stopped showing up. But that's later. For now, all I knew was this. She came back, and that was the beginning of the end of quiet in my life. The third time she came by, she brought coffee. Not gas station sludge or instant powder. No, this stuff was rich, bold, perfectly brewed. It came in a stainless steel thermos that looked more like it belonged in an executive boardroom than on my oil-stained workbench. She poured a cup for me, black without asking how I liked it, and it was perfect. The kind of cup that makes you stop mid-turn of a socket wrench and wonder why your own coffee suddenly tastes like boiled sop. "You like it?" she asked, casually wiping off one of my dusty counter stools. "Yeah," I muttered, "a little too much." Then she started organizing tools. Not just tossing things into a bin, but naming them. "Your torque wrench was under the shelf, by the way," she said, "and your 14 millimeters socket had rolled under the radiator fluid drums." I blinked. No one, not even my most experienced interns, had ever walked in and named everything in my cluttered garage like that. And yet, she moved through it like she'd been raised in a Snap-on catalog. And then there was the watch. Slim, gold, understated, but I knew the brand, Jaeger LeCoultre, because my late wife used to collect watch magazines. That thing cost more than my truck. Her leather jacket? Italian. The stitching alone whispered money. But she never acted like it. She never flaunted. She never explained. And still, she fit into our days like she'd always been there. That night, as Sophie sat at the dinner table coloring next to Amber, she leaned over and whispered, loudly enough for me to hear, "Dad, is she a princess?" Amber looked up, amused. I didn't answer, because the truth was, I didn't know. All I knew was this woman dressed like Gotham City, brewed coffee like a barista in Rome, handled a wrench like a seasoned mechanic, and somehow wanted to hang around a widowed grease monkey and his chalk-covered daughter. It didn't add up. None of it did. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to question it out loud. The forecast said clear skies, but the rain had its own opinion. By late evening, thunder grumbled low above Willow Creek again, and sheets of water danced against the tin roof of my garage. I'd just finished locking up when I heard her voice behind me. "Think I could borrow that couch again?" She said it casually, but her eyes, they looked tired. Not just from the weather, but from something else, something she still wasn't saying. I nodded, holding the door open. "You already know where everything is." Sophie squealed when she saw her. "Amber's sleeping over again," she shouted like it was Christmas. I didn't correct her. We kept things simple. Again, cup noodles, a few leftover biscuits, and one of Sophie's bedtime cartoons playing low on the living room TV. Amber sat cross-legged on the couch with a mug of warm tea in her hands, her eyes following the screen, but her mind clearly elsewhere. When Sophie finally drifted off in her room, I brought out a spare blanket. Amber was already stretched out on the couch, head resting on the armrest, leather jacket folded neatly beside her. "You sure you're okay with this?" I asked. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment. "It's quieter here." Then she closed them again. No nightmares this time, no whispered protests against invisible puppeteers, just breathing, steady, soft. I sat at the kitchen table, pretending to read a manual, but really just listening to the silence. A peaceful kind of silence, the kind that fills a house and makes it feel like something is right for once. And I hated how much I liked it. Because here's the thing, I was starting to get used to her being here, to the scent of her perfume lingering in the hallway, to the 2 mugs drying next to the sink instead of 1, to Sophie's laughter sounding just a little brighter. And that scared me, because I knew better than to hold on to something that could vanish without warning. But that night, that quiet, rainy second night, I let myself believe, for just a moment, that maybe she wasn't going anywhere. It was Sunday morning when the dream cracked. Amber had taken Sophie out to the farmer's market, said she wanted to teach her how to pick ripe strawberries, whatever that meant. I stayed behind to catch up on a long overdue carburetor job. When I walked into the kitchen for a glass of water, I almost didn't see it. A sleek white business card sat on the counter. Not mine, not Sophie's. It hadn't been there before. Thick cardstock, gold lettering. Whitmore Holdings, a division of Whitmore International Group, and below it in even smaller font, Harold K. Langston, Executive Director of Private Affairs. Private Affairs? I stared at the card like it might catch fire. Then I flipped it over. One word handwritten in immaculate script. Tell her we spoke. That was it. No number, no explanation, just that quiet threat in cursive. I dropped everything and grabbed my phone. It took less than a minute. Amber Whitmore. There she was, staring back at me from a Forbes 30 Under 30 article. Dark eyes, high cheekbones, a sleek black dress at some tech conference in Singapore. The caption read, "Acting CEO of Whitmore Holdings, one of the youngest women to take the reins of a Fortune 500 company." My hands went cold. Everything clicked and shattered at once. The coffee, the way she organized tools like a pro, that watch, the hesitation when Sophie called her a princess, the way she never really said what she did or where she was going next. She wasn't just running from someone. She was running from a whole life. I sank into the nearest chair, the card still between my fingers. It wasn't just that she'd lied. It was that she'd walked into my world pretending to be no one, when the truth was she belonged to a world so far from ours it might as well have been another planet. And the worst part? I didn't feel angry. I felt afraid. Because now that I knew who she really was, I also knew the truth. She didn't belong here, and she never really could. I waited until Sophie went to bed. I didn't trust myself to hold it in front of her, not with the way my heart was pounding and my hands wouldn't stop clenching. The business card still sat in my pocket like a stone. And Amber? She was sitting on my porch swing, sipping tea like nothing had shifted. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. She looked up, smiled, and I broke. "Who the hell is Harold Langston?" I asked flatly. The color drained from her face. The mug in her hand wobbled slightly. She didn't speak, didn't blink, so I kept going. "Whitmore Holdings, CEO, billion-dollar empire, Forbes profile. That you?" Amber slowly set the mug down. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "You walked into my shop like some lost traveler," I said, my voice low. A little rain, a broken bike, a scared smile. "And you let me believe that was the truth. You let my daughter fall in love with someone who doesn't even exist." "I didn't lie," she whispered, eyes glistening. "Not about the things that mattered." "Everything you said was a lie," I snapped. "You were playing house in a town that wasn't yours, in a life that wasn't yours." "What is this, Amber? Some social experiment? A corporate detox? A reality show?" She stood abruptly, voice trembling. "I didn't come here to play games. I came here to breathe, to feel like a person again, not a puppet, not a headline." "Then why didn't you tell me?" I asked, quieter now but no less furious. "Why hide it?" "Because people don't treat me like a person when they know. They treat me like a position, a deal, a story." I shook my head. "And what about my daughter?" I said, voice breaking now. "You tucked her in, read her stories, let her call you family? Was that part of your escape too? Was she just scenery?" Tears streamed down Amber's face. "No. God, no. Sophie's the only real thing I've had in months." I didn't know what hurt more, her tears or the fact that I wanted to believe them. But the truth settled in my chest like lead. Whatever this had been, it wasn't real enough to survive the truth. The next morning she was packing. No explanation, no pleading, just quiet motions, folding her clothes, tucking them into that weather-worn duffel bag she'd carried the night she arrived. The one I now knew probably never held anything she couldn't buy 100 times over. Sophie sat on the edge of the couch, clutching Amber's scarf like it was a lifeline. "Where are you going?" my daughter whispered, her voice raw from crying. Amber crouched in front of her. Her eyes were red. Her hands shook as she tucked a strand of Sophie's hair behind her ear. "I have to go home, sweetheart." "This is your home," Sophie said. "You made pancakes here." My throat closed. Amber didn't correct her, didn't explain the difference between temporary and forever. She just pulled Sophie into a hug, so tight it looked like she was trying to memorize the shape of her, and maybe she was. I stood in the doorway, my arms crossed, heart aching in a way I hadn't felt since Sarah's funeral. But this time, I couldn't blame death. This time, it was me. She turned to me slowly, eyes full of things she wasn't saying. I said them for her. "You don't belong here, Amber." Her face tightened. I mean it. We're just a small-town stop on your runaway map. You've got a legacy, a last name that comes with headlines. My daughter and I, we don't fit into that. A pause. And maybe we never did. She looked at me like I'd just pulled her heart out and placed it on the floor. But she didn't argue. Didn't fight. Just slung the bag over her shoulder and walked to the door. Sophie ran to her, grabbed her hand with both of hers. Please don't go. I'll be good. You can stay in my room. Amber's lips trembled. She bent down, kissed Sophie's forehead. I love you, monkey. Then she looked at me, whispered, I never meant to break anything, and stepped out into the rain. It was cold, sharp, just like the night she arrived. Only this time, she didn't look lost. She looked shattered. They say it only takes 1 second to change everything. For me, it wasn't even a second. It was the absence of a second. The silence where my daughter's laughter should have been. We were at Hollow Creek, just me and Sophie, her favorite picnic spot. I was trying to make up for the void Amber left behind. Sophie had stopped asking about her out loud, but I saw it. The way she lingered by the window in the evenings, listening for a knock that never came. So that day, I packed her favorite peanut butter sandwiches, brought her old kite, and promised her we'd chase clouds. She was running ahead of me, her arms stretched like airplane wings, her curls bouncing under the sunlight. Daddy, look how fast it goes, she shouted, pointing up at the paper kite dancing in the wind. I smiled. Then she tripped. Just a root. A stupid, gnarled piece of wood sticking out of the earth like some cruel joke. Her foot caught, her body twisted, and then she fell. At first I laughed, thought she'd pop up and dust herself off like always. But then I saw her stillness. The unnatural angle of her neck, the way her fingers twitched but didn't move. I ran, dropped everything. I don't even remember how I carried her or how long it took to get to the hospital. They took her from my arms, nurses moved like lightning, machines beeped in chaos, and I was shoved into a cold plastic chair in a hallway that smelled like bleach and heartbreak. She's suffered a traumatic brain injury, the doctor told me. We need to operate to relieve intracranial pressure. Time is critical. I nodded. Do it. But then his tone changed. Mr. Harwood, your insurance policy doesn't cover the required procedure. You were shifted to a basic tier after missing your last employment coverage audit. We'll need a $70,000 deposit up front. It felt like someone had sucker punched me. I stammered, told him I had some savings, a couple thousand, a truck, my garage, my blood if they wanted. It wasn't enough. So I sat there, hands trembling, shirt soaked in Sophie's tears and sweat, my mind screaming but my body frozen. I whispered a prayer, real, desperate and raw, and that's when a nurse tapped my shoulder. There's a call for you, she said. A woman. She says she knows you. I took the phone, barely able to hold it to my ear. And then, her voice. Lucas, she breathed. Amber. Just her name nearly undid me. I heard about Sophie. I'm coming. Just hold on, please, just hold on. And for the first time that day, I did. I don't remember hanging up. I just remember turning around and seeing her. Amber. Soaked from the rain, hair plastered to her face, a duffel bag in one hand, her phone still in the other. Her eyes were wild with worry, but her voice was calm, in charge, the way you'd imagine someone born to lead an empire would sound. Where's the attending physician? She asked the front desk, not even looking at me. Get me Dr. Lin from St. Augustine. I'll handle the transport. And have finance fax over the payment slip. Full amount. Right now. I stood there stunned as the receptionist's eyes darted between us, then moved fast. People always moved when Amber Whitmore gave orders. Within the hour, Sophie was in surgery. Amber didn't sit. She commanded the waiting room like a general, pacing, calling, texting, coordinating. At one point, I heard her say, "No, I don't care what the board thinks. This is more important." She was all business. Until the doctor came out. When we heard the words "successful procedure," her knees buckled, and I caught her before she hit the floor. She stayed at the hospital for the next 3 days, not in a hotel, not at some luxury suite. She refused to leave Sophie's side. She slept in that tiny blue recliner beside Sophie's bed, curled up, still in the same clothes. Every couple hours she'd get up, wring out a towel, and gently wipe Sophie's forehead. She read to her, everything from storybooks to pieces of the newspaper. She even told her silly made-up stories about a squirrel named Theodore who stole French fries and fell in love with a pigeon named Daisy. Sophie didn't respond. Not at first, but Amber kept going. Her voice never cracked. Her hands never shook. I couldn't take my eyes off her. This wasn't the woman I'd accused of running away from her life. This was someone who would burn down the world for the people she loved. I asked her once, in a whisper, "Why are you doing this?" She looked at me like I was the fool. "Because she's yours," she said softly. "And you? You're mine." I wanted to tell her how much that meant, but my voice wouldn't come. So I just sat beside her, and for the first time in weeks, I let myself believe maybe we could belong in the same world after all. It was sometime after 2 a.m. The hospital hallway was dim, humming with the quiet rhythms of machines and fluorescent lights. I stood just outside Sophie's room, half hidden by the doorframe, watching Amber through the narrow glass panel. She was brushing Sophie's hair with the little pink comb we kept in her overnight bag. Slow, careful strokes, as if each strand mattered. Sophie was awake now, groggy, eyes still heavy from the sedatives. But she was smiling. And Amber? Amber was glowing. Not in some movie star, magazine cover way, but in the way my wife used to glow. Back when she was just a mom, not trying to be anything more. Amber wasn't putting on a show. She wasn't being polite. She was present, completely, heartbreakingly present. Sophie whispered something, and Amber leaned in to listen. Then she laughed. A soft, unguarded sound, the kind of laugh you don't fake. And in that moment, standing alone in the quiet hallway, I felt something inside me let go. The anger, the fear, the stupid pride, it all just dissolved. I stepped into the room, quietly. Amber looked up, surprised at first, but then her eyes softened. "She asked for chocolate pudding," she said with a half smile. "Hospital food must be worse than I thought." I smiled back, then sat on the edge of the bed across from her. There was a silence between us. Not awkward, just full. Finally, I said, "You didn't do all this because you felt guilty, did you?" She shook her head slowly. "No, I did it because I love her." I nodded, then looked straight at her. "You know, I don't need your money, Amber." She didn't flinch. "I just need someone who'll love that little girl like her mother did. That's all I've ever wanted." Amber blinked fast, but didn't look away. "I'm trying," she whispered. Every second, I reached across the bed and took her hand. Her fingers tightened around mine, warm and trembling. We sat like that, the three of us, in that small, sterile room that somehow didn't feel sterile at all. Outside, the night stretched on in peaceful silence. Inside, I realized something I hadn't dared to believe until then. She wasn't just passing through our lives. She was already a part of them. Some people thought she was crazy, giving up the title of interim CEO of Whitmore Holdings, walking away from marble offices and boardroom deals to settle in a town that didn't even have a stoplight. But Amber didn't just walk away. She ran toward something, or maybe she returned to it. 3 weeks after Sophie was discharged, Amber resigned. No press release, no corporate spin, just a quiet letter typed on her father's old typewriter. She said it felt more real that way. The media would spin it later. Heiress chooses love over legacy, but I saw the truth behind the headlines. She chose us. And Willow Creek chose her right back. She opened a little community workshop 2 blocks down from my garage. The Fix-It Nest, she called it. A space for kids to learn hands-on skills. Bicycle repair, basic tools, small engine work. The first day she opened the doors, 6 boys showed up. The next week she had a waiting list. She never advertised. She didn't need to. Word got around. There was something magnetic about seeing a woman who used to wear power suits, now in overalls and a ponytail, teaching 10-year-olds how to replace a spark plug with more patience than most teachers I know. She still kept a hand in the business, consulting remotely a few hours a week. But her world had shrunk in the best possible way, and that world now included early morning coffee runs, Sunday grocery trips, pancake breakfasts, and Wednesday night movie marathons with Sophie snuggled between us on the couch. Sometimes I'd walk into the kitchen and find her and Sophie elbow deep in flour, baking banana bread like they were born to be mother and daughter. And in the middle of it all, I'd think, she gave it all up for us. And somehow, it didn't feel like a sacrifice. It felt like something being rebuilt from the ground up, with stronger parts, better tools. Love had become our blueprint, and every day with her was another brick in the house we were building together. Amber Whitmore once ruled a billion-dollar empire. Now she ruled our little world, and somehow I think she liked it better. Some men take their girl to Paris and get down on one knee under the Eiffel Tower. I took mine to the back of my garage, with grease on my hands and a trembling heart in my chest. It was late, nearly midnight. Sophie had fallen asleep on the couch, with her math book still open, and the air smelled like rain and engine oil. Two scents that somehow always reminded me of Amber now. She was sitting on the old metal stool, her hair pulled up messily, wearing one of my old flannel shirts over a white tank top. Her cheeks were still smudged from teaching the kids at the workshop that afternoon. She looked radiant. Like a sunset the world forgot to notice. I reached into the top drawer of my tool chest, not for a diamond, but for something I'd been working on in secret. A small silver ring, rough around the edges, made from the threaded rim of an old axle bolt. I know it's not fancy, I said, voice shaking. It's not gold or platinum, it won't sparkle in candlelight or turn heads in a ballroom. I held it out to her on the flat of my palm. But it's strong, it's been through fire and pressure and miles of road, like us. It won't break easy. Amber looked down at it, then back at me. Her eyes were glassy. I carved it myself, I added, suddenly shy. The W inside? It's not just for Whitmore. It's for Willow Creek, for Walker, for wife, if you'll be mine. She didn't say anything, just reached out with trembling fingers and took the ring. Then she laughed. Then she cried, and finally she whispered, "It's perfect." When I slid it onto her finger, it didn't gleam. It didn't flash. But something inside me did. Something I hadn't felt since the day I said goodbye to Sophie's mom. Hope. Real, lasting, stay up all night kind of hope. I pulled her into my arms, and the metal of the old bolt pressed cool against my chest. She said yes. Not to a fairy tale, not to a fortune, but to me, to greasy fingers, stubborn bolts, and quiet nights. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like everything. I never imagined I'd get married again, not after losing Sophie's mom, not after the years of silence, guilt, and grief that wrapped around our lives like winter frost that never melted. But there I was, standing under a string of dollar store LED lights right in the middle of my garage, with my heart pounding like a V8 engine, waiting for Amber Whitmore to walk down an aisle made of old floor mats and oil-stained concrete. She didn't wear a designer gown. She didn't have a diamond tiara or a veil trailing 10 feet behind her. She wore a cream sundress that Sophie helped pick out, a crown of wildflowers Martha from the bakery had put together that morning, and that ring I made from an axle bolt, now polished to a soft glow on her finger. And she looked more stunning than any bride I'd ever seen. We didn't send invitations to the press. There were no magazine photographers, no viral hashtags, just our people. Martha brought cupcakes and a strawberry cake that leaned slightly to one side. Tom from the auto shop welded 2 old wrenches into a heart and hung it above the garage door. Sophie stood between us, proudly holding the little book of vows she made us write by hand. The music? A Bluetooth speaker and a playlist Amber and I made the night before, filled with old Motown, some Springsteen, and a few acoustic covers of songs she used to hum while cleaning up after dinner. When the officiant, our mailman who happened to be certified online, asked, "Do you, Lucas Walker, take this woman?" I didn't just say yes. I said every day. Every flat tire, spilled coffee, burnt toast day for the rest of my life. Amber laughed through her tears, squeezed Sophie's hand, and said, "Me too." And that was it. We kissed under flickering lights, next to my toolbox, with the smell of rubber and cinnamon rolls in the air, and our neighbors cheering like we'd just won the Super Bowl. There were no chandeliers, no grand ballroom, but there was love. The kind that doesn't fade after the honeymoon, the kind that fixes bikes, reads bedtime stories, and stays up all night when someone has a fever. We didn't just start a marriage that night. We rebuilt a family. Right there in that garage. Some nights, after Sophie's fallen asleep and the world outside our little garage apartment goes quiet, I sit on the porch with Amber, sipping coffee from mismatched mugs. The stars above Willow Creek don't care that she used to run a billion-dollar company. They shine just the same. Sometimes she still gets calls, big offers, old colleagues asking if she'll come back to the real world. She always looks at me first, then at Sophie's drawings pinned on the fridge behind us, and she says the same thing every time. I already am in the real world. I found mine. She teaches kids now, mechanics, electronics, even a bit of business, and she's ridiculously good at it. The town calls her Miss Amber, but the look in her eyes when Sophie runs into her arms after school, that's not a teacher. That's a mother. We're not rich, not by the world's standards, but every Thursday we make pizza from scratch, every Sunday we walk to the lake, and every morning we wake up next to the people we love. And that's everything. So if you've made it this far with us, thank you. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Daily Stories of Grace. There are so many kinds of love in this world. Unexpected, messy, healing kinds. And we're just getting started sharing them with you. Because sometimes the greatest grace is just choosing each other every single day.